All right, and I have a little bit of quiet time and thought I'd use about 10 minutes to talk about my spiritual experience and what I've learned from it. We all have a sphere of influence, and what might help one person might help another, or it might not help another. I think we can all agree that when we are open-minded, when we respect one another, we don't have to agree with one another, but just that respect, we grow better, and we have better relationships. My spiritual walk, that's how I'll begin, is with a walk. It started 6 years ago. And what happened was I saw something that really made my mind start to think about spiritual things in a way it never had. When I look at it in retrospect, everything that happened before that was like in a fog. My mind didn't allow myself to go in that direction. I didn't have any desire. I remember being asked and telling people I had no desire. But now that I had seen this from a different perspective, it really consumed me, and I started to really want an answer. And so I sought evidence from all sides and wanted to weigh the evidence. And as the evidence started to mount and mount and mount, with time, I saw that there is a personal being, a supreme being. And when you realize that, what happens is you start to really assess your own life and say, whoa, what am I doing in my life? Okay, it's a relationship. Now it's starting to be a relationship. And it's a relationship that starts, for me, it started in fear. And let me explain what I mean by that. It starts in fear because, for two reasons. One is because, remember, you just came out of the world. And the world's understanding of God is really based out of fear. Fear in two senses. One, in that the world fears God, and they fear being ridiculed for, knowing or researching who God is, by others. And so, the world gives us this picture that God is, that he has his lightning bolts, that he's waiting for you to trip and fall and laugh at you, etc., that he's a tyrant. So you have to, in the beginning, kind of, it's a process where you have to learn who he is for yourself. It's much like a child, okay? A child in the beginning has to, a parent will sometimes implement fear into the child. Fear about crossing the road. Fear about not grabbing boiling water off the stove, etc. And this fear is instilled so that, because the child is not developed enough to really understand the consequences. And so it's the same with us. We have this relationship starts out of fear. And what begins as fear, okay, am I good enough? It's really an insecurity. You're looking at yourself. You were before this looking at others, their criticisms, their faults. You're looking everywhere else. But as this relationship starts to develop, you're no longer looking at everyone else and yourself, but you start to look at God. And when you start to realize who God is, not from what other people tell you, and you start to experience it for yourself, this fear turns into reverence. I hope I'm making sense. So this reverence, okay, this respect, okay, really starts to grow, and you start to fall in love with what you're seeing. And as you start to fall in love, you start to trust. And as you start to trust this God that can intervene, you start to believe can intervene in your life, you start to see him intervening in your life. And what happens is now you have a real relationship that's starting off. So it's not built off of fear, and it's never was supposed to be built off of fear, but it's built off of knowing who God is. It's like a relationship with a significant other. When you first saw that person, there wasn't fear. Okay? It was, you saw that person, and that person liked you for who you were. Just like you realize that God likes you for who you are, right? He created all of us as individuals. And so when you're in this relationship with this significant other, it starts off, just liking each other for being themselves. And then it grows into trust, and then all these elements of the relationship begin to come in. And so with God, and God is very real, It's, there's this concept in the Bible that by beholding, we become changed, right? That makes sense. If you are, if you are subscribed to a YouTube channel that has people ridiculing others, don't be surprised if you start to emulate and start to, have a critical spirit yourself, because, it's just the way it works. Whereas if you start to take your eyes off of self and off of others and start to look at who God is through his Son, through Christ and his character, then what happens? You start to emulate that which you see, that which you respect. And so, here Christ, he says, I condemn no one. I didn't come to condemn the world, but to save the world, right? My Father, he judges no one. He's our intercessor, he's our mediator, etc. Christ, he never criticized anyone. He never passed a judgment on anyone. Even with the Pharisees, he reproved them, but in love. And so you start to see these traits of character, and without even realizing it, it starts to become a part of you, and you start to take on this character, where you have enemies or people that you did not get along with as well in the past, and maybe you don't get along that well, but you have a love for them and you have a desire for that relationship to improve. Okay, statistically, people that are or have a spiritual background live longer. And I think this is the concept. My heart and everything is more at peace when I love others rather than having resentment and holding on to grudges, etc. We are a lot healthier. So I'm making this video just because I believe that Christ is coming soon. There's so much biblical evidence from so many different perspectives and ways. It's undeniable, and it's not just the Bible. If you study ancient civilizations, they said the same thing, and so it's not. This is not something isolated to Christianity. Martin Luther from the 1500s believed that Christ was coming in the 2000s, about this time. Sir Isaac Newton, in the 1700s, also believed that Christ was coming sometime in our day. Jewish scholars of old, they also understood this concept and are looking to around our time. In a very, very, very simple way, because there's a lot of ways that the Bible points to now. But there's the concept in the Bible that, 7 is the number of completion. God created in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested, right? Well, if you count from Adam down to right now, about our time, we are at about the 6,000th year. God allows a little room for error, so we don't know the exact year, but we are at the 6,000 year mark. And so you have this parallel. The Bible says a day to God is like 1,000 years. You have 6 days for the world to be completed, and then, a day of rest. And you have 6,000 years for the earth, for spiritually, the work to be completed. And then we have, in Revelation, a millennium of rest. So it's the same concept. This is repeated all throughout the scriptures in many different ways with different numbers all coming to the same point, which is just amazing. There are 7 continents, there are 7 seas, there's 7 colors in the rainbow, there are 7 musical notes, there's 7 billion people in the world now, think about that. And so it's just, there's a lot of things that are pointing to today, not that those point to today. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, if you were to look, not just at the calamities, we're going to live in a whole different world now. COVID-19, this pandemic has changed the world. It's not going to be like it used to be. If you're in California, you haven't been able to breathe healthy air for more than a month. There's ashes every day and you cannot see the sun. Okay, it's people say it's apocalyptic. It looks dreadful outside. We're entering hurricane season. We just had the worst floods in Sudan in over 100 years, and many other calamities that occur worldwide. And anyway, I could keep going. But my point is, that you need to have your own relationship. You can't come to a crisis. If Christ comes and there is a crisis, you cannot build a relationship based on fear. All right, I'm catching myself going into a tangent, and I want to keep this to a short video. But Christ is coming soon. It's likely that he'll come in our lifetime. If you look to the Bible, history repeats itself. The Bible says there's no new thing under the sun. When Christ came, it was the fishermen, it was the accountants, the prostitutes, etc., that heard his call. Okay, it was those that were least expected that heard him. Okay, it was the minority, and the religious groups are the ones that fell behind. It stayed stagnant, and after the cross, the same thing. When the gospel went out, it was the minority that carried the gospel to the ends of the earth. Today, you're going to have the same thing. If there's a crisis, who's going to stand up for what's right? And I think it's going to be those that are, least expected. In the Bible, there's this, you have to remember that the Israelites, when they were going through the desert, it says that many of them, they perished from unbelief. Okay, these are the same people that saw the Red Sea open. They saw a pillar of fire by night that kept them warm. They had the cloud by day that protected them from the desert sun. They had manna that fell from the sky every day except for the Sabbath. The the water that came out of the rock, etc. So their needs were supplied. They had all these evidences that were in front of them. Yet they died because of unbelief. And so, you have to say, well, what then is unbelief? Belief is not just seeing something and saying, okay, I believe because I see. Because they saw a lot of things in the Bible and they didn't believe. And so belief is something that really changes the heart. And it really, again, it's when you have this relationship, and that relationship is what changes you, not the fear. And so when we come to this crisis in our future, are you going to respond out of principle, out of a relationship, out of integrity, or is it going to be fear-based? So I think we should all contemplate that. I'm going to attach a little video down to the bottom just because some people have never watched anything spiritual, and this is one individual. His messages are really simple. I like them, and there's a lot of people that I enjoy listening to. But just to start off, I'll give you this gentleman. Click below.